Hello, welcome to another briefing. In this video, I wanted to start out by showing this massive ridge of high pressure. This is a classic heat dome signature over the Yukon and Northwest Territories of Canada into parts of eastern Alaska. And the reason I wanted to show that is because this is going to have an effect. Part of what makes weather so interesting is that this is going to have an effect on weather in the continental United States. Because weather on one end of the globe will eventually, it's all connected by the jet stream in the atmosphere. It's a fluid. So if there's weather going on one side of the globe, it will eventually have an influence on what's going on the other side of the globe or hundreds or thousands of miles away. Now, what we're seeing here with this big ridge of high pressure sending the jet stream winds way up and over the Yukon area and the Northwestern Territories is it's carving out this trough, which is gonna dive down into the Central Plains and the Great Lakes regions of the United States. Because when you have so the jet stream, when it's doing a lot of waves, when you have a wave, you have a ridge on one end. What's gonna happen on the other end? You're gonna have a trough. This is natural effect that we have. You have the wind corridor is being bumped up. Over here, it's got to go down somewhere else. So this is what's happening. We have this big ridge, as you can see. I'm showing with the mouse here. You see this big ridge over northwestern Canada, and you see a trough carving out right here, getting ready to make its move down into the Central Plains. Now you'll see what I mean as I put this into motion. So we're starting out at 2 p.m., this projection for 2 p.m. Pacific time today, and I'm going to put this into motion here. We're going through tomorrow afternoon. This is 5 p.m. tomorrow now. And you can see how this trough carves out here and starts to make a southward movement towards the Central Plains of the United States. Now, this is allowing much cooler air from the polar regions to drop down into the Central Plains. Now, if this were happening in the winter time, this would be a major Arctic blast scenario where we would have temperatures well below freezing, dangerous wind chill values, and all of that stuff that's associated with winter Arctic blasts. But since we are in the summer, these polar lobes, as they're called, are not as strong. There's just not as much cold air available up in the polar regions as there is in the winter. There's still cold air. It's colder than it is down south, but it's just these cold waves aren't as strong in the summer. They're more like cool downs. But it will be a significant cool down nonetheless. Have a pretty deep trough being carved out here. I'm going to put this into motion a little more and watch through the end of the week. Watch, this is through Friday, what happens when this trough opening the doors for this cooler air to spill down from northern Canada, northeastern Canada into the plains, while this ridge that was over the Gulf of Alaska starts to progress to the east. Now I'm going to show you the temperature anomaly at 5,000 feet. This will give you a good idea of this. This is looking at the projection for early Saturday morning, the 10th of August, and you can clearly see the anomalies here well represented where I was showing that ridge. I'm just going to back this up a little bit. Let's start out on Wednesday the 7th. So this is where I was showing that ridge sitting over the Yukon area. Look at those anomalies, like way above average temperatures at the 5,000 foot level for these areas, as it makes sense. And then look at the flip side. Look at where that trough is carving out over the Central Plains. well below average conditions. And I'm going to put this into motion, and look at that. Look at that blast of cold air just pushing in, pushing down through the plains. This cooler than normal air making it all the way down to places like Oklahoma and Arkansas. And it won't be as significantly cold down there. It's not going to get chilly, but it'll be much cooler than it has been. This is likely going to translate into upper 80s instead of 100s, which is much better. It's still going to be a significant relief. And then you go into states to the north, like North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, you're going to have maybe even chilly conditions, certainly in the morning. So definitely a big push of cooler air happening here as we put this into motion, going all the way in through Sunday. And now there's something else I wanted to talk about. Before I get into temperatures later in the video, I wanted to show this little cool down that we might eventually have over California. Now, it's been anomalously very warm over the last few weeks. And we had a brief cool down in early July, but not very long lived. We just heated right back up again. But now we have significant indications showing up in the computer models for a few days now. It's been pretty consistent that we're gonna have a trough of lower pressure carving out over the California region too, which will bring much cooler conditions as well. So I'm going to put this into motion, and pay attention at this little shortwave ridge that develops just west of British Columbia as we go in for Saturday here. See, there's this little ridge developing over it's a weaker ridge. It's not like this massive ridge over Canada, but you see there's a little shortwave ridge that forms here, right south of the Gulf of Alaska, west of BC. And watch what that does with a little trough carving out over the Pacific Northwest. See, look at that. Watch that. So this is going into Monday night. This is 11 p.m. Pacific on Monday the 12th. And you can see here this trough and these below average height anomalies. This is basically the thickness of the atmosphere at 18,000 feet. You can see this blue shading showing below average values, which is gonna allow a lighter atmosphere, which is going to allow for cooler marine air to lift up and over the coastal hills and into a lot of the inland valleys, which is gonna cool off the temperatures significantly. And look at what happens here. This ridge intensifies as it nudges up towards the Gulf of Alaska. And as a consequence, this trough deepens and intensifies as it plunges cooler air down into these western states here. And I'm going to show you the temperature anomaly map at 5,000 feet now. And you can clearly see this happen. Watch what happens over the Pacific Northwest here. This is that trough that I was just showing. Going into Thursday the 15th, look at this. Look at how anomalously cold the air gets at 5,000 feet over California, for instance. Washington, Oregon, California, these regions are all going to feel the significant cool down, much below average here. It's going to be some well-needed relief. Now, let's get into temperatures. So, we're starting out here Tuesday the 6th. We still have pretty hot conditions pretty hot conditions west of the Four Corners region. We have, particularly for California, we have a lot of 100 teens in the deserts. We have 100s up and down the Central Valley. We have 80s for the Tahoe region. Still pretty warm up in the mountains. We have coast and bayside locations near the Bay Area, maybe hanging on to 60s and 60s right along the immediate coast where that cold water is, and you get that onshore wind, but 70s, 80s, and then quickly into the 90s and 100s as you go further inland. And then you're looking at about 83 for Portland. That's right about average. Seattle down to 78, also about average for this time of year. So Portland and Seattle have been getting some relief already from this heat. But we are looking for that relief to expand further south. And so first I'm going to show the cool down across the plains that I was showing in earlier depictions here. So this is Tuesday, and then watch Wednesday. Look at Wednesday. Look at some highs only in the 60s across Montana. This is really chilly for August. And you got also some 60s across North Dakota, barely hitting 70 degrees in some areas here. Got in 70s, 80s for a lot of Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, but that's still below average for what they expect this time of year. As we put this in the Thursday and Friday, watch that. Denver area might not get out of the 70s. We have 70s for high temperatures all the way down to Nebraska. Even parts of Oklahoma here might not get out of the 70s. This is much cooler air than we usually have this time of year. And so now we're going into Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and watch what happens on the West Coast. As we go into Monday the 12th, 70s for Washington State, Western Washington. You have temperatures just in the low 80s for most of the Willamette Valley here. And then you have the Central Valley of California, only 80s in some areas, only 90s further south. We're starting to see a cool down here. And then you go into Tuesday and Wednesday. And this is still quite a ways out on the computer modeling. So you should take this forecast with a grain of salt when you go that far out. But definitely seeing indications that we have potentially much cooler air to come. Certainly this week for the plains, and then it's looking like next week we're gonna have some good relief for areas further out west too. Thunderstorms in the mountains, something to always be aware of this time of year. Looking at today, this is where it looks like the thunderstorms will mostly pop off, looking like mostly areas of Arizona into southwestern Colorado, and then also parts of Montana into parts of northern Wyoming. And then tomorrow, as that ridge shifts around a little bit, the wind flow changes, we have those thunderstorms a little further east. A lot more activity over Colorado tomorrow as the ridge kind of shifts positions and allows more of that wraparound moisture to come in down through these areas. We're gonna have the ridge is actually gonna be mostly over the Utah and Nevada area. You notice these areas that aren't forecasted to get a lot of storm activity tomorrow. That's where the big dome is sitting over, and then you have wraparound moisture around it. That's bringing storms further east. Well, that's pretty much all I had to talk about today. I hope this was helpful. I hope you were able to get something out of it. I always enjoy doing these videos as well, just to keep track of what's going on with the weather at a certain point in a certain week, and then being able to look back at it later on, several months or years down the road. It's always kind of a cool experience. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.